going into SWAP. And SWAP is what I call Wise Apologetics and Polemics. And again, what we're doing in this seminar is we're taking 3 big topics and trying to cover them in about 50 minutes. So this SWAP is actually a couple of hours of training. So I can't give you all the examples or everything about it, but I want you to start thinking some about it and about some ways that you can use it. Streetwise apologetics and polemics. And that's because why? Well, professional platforms, professional debaters, people that have live streams, they have time to make their presentation. They can make an organized, logical presentation. But those of us that are out on the street, we don't have that luxury. When you're talking to your Muslim seatmate in class, or your neighbor, or your family member, usually, they're not going to let you talk for 20 minutes uninterrupted. So you have to be able to say something short and powerful. So that's why I say you only have 1 or 2 sentences, okay? You have to make every word count like 50. And although we can't go through all of what I call all the swaps, what we try to do is be like Jesus, suit the answer to the person and to their personality and what they're trying to do, and make it short, powerful. There's a saying, short, sharp, shock. Another saying is, less is more. So when I talk about streetwise apologetics and polemics, let me clarify it for you, because some of you have known that a long time. Others might or might not have figured this out from the seminar this weekend. But basically, apologetics is defending the faith. I also consider it's taking out the stumbling blocks that keep people from believing. You're not apologizing, you're just trying to get the truth through to them clearly, like 2 Corinthians chapter 3. And then polemics is actually when you are challenging, you're pointing out the problems in their faith. Our goal with SWAP is to get beyond these stumbling blocks and strongholds. Here you see a beautiful tower from Morocco. We want to get rid of what keeps them from following Christ. And I think this is easy to identify and remember. It's so important to keep the main thing. So it maybe sounds trite, but the main thing is to keep the main thing, you know? So just think main thing. You don't want to get sidetracked. You somehow want to get to sharing the gospel with them when it's appropriate and in the best way. So that's keeping the main thing. Now we're going to talk about arguing with someone, whether you're defending the faith or not. And these are things that I find really help. Those of you who were with me at the mosque might have noticed that my style is very different than a lot of the other people there. And I'm not saying it's better or worse, but I know what kind of results it has given. And by God's grace, it doesn't offend them as much, so I have more chance to share the gospel with them. So here are guidelines. First, identify with them. That means try to find some connection, some bridge, so that you are feeling like you're on their team. By God's grace, I had the chance to share with a Syrian family of 6 at the mosque. And that's because I went up to them, spoke nicely, related to their family, complimented their children, and it was real, because I also have children and grandchildren. So there's an identification there. The second thing is say it in love. If you're angry at these people, if you don't want them in heaven, as one of our former Muslim brothers says, if you don't want these people in heaven, don't share the gospel with them, because they might get there. So whatever you say it in love. So I always ask, Lord, fill me. May they sense your presence. May they sense your love. That's as important as the words. Some of you might have heard an example I gave about how 10 years later, a Christian who spoke to a Muslim at the mosque, when they were in need, 10 years after that, they remembered the love and joy in the Christian. So say what you say in love. One of our volunteers who has passed away, I used to say, she can tell you you're going to hell and you'll thank her for it because she's so loving. Basically, her pathos, as we talked about the emotion, was very good at connecting with people. I believe you should give credit for what people know that is true. I don't believe in just putting them down or saying, you blah, 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 blah. Well, yeah, that might all be true. But try to find some common ground. Give them credit. Remember that Muslims work very hard. And most Christians don't work as hard at practicing their faith. So I kind of give them credit for that. If I'm talking to them, I'll say, but no matter how hard we work, none of us is good enough to make it to heaven. So I don't discount that. Consider the setting. The way you talk in front of a mosque is different than when you're with your friend or what you're doing online. And then I say use the best challenges. We've got some really good challenges out there. As Christians, we're arguing from a place of strength. So I would like each of you, as another assignment for your swap, which are the arguments you think are strongest and you can relate in one sentence or two sentences. If you have to use two Bible passages, you're going to lose them. So try to use something that you have one passage. You don't have to say this and because of this, that, unless you absolutely have to. Where, it says something like those who disbelieve should be killed, and another passage that says Christians are disbelievers. There are times you might need to use two passages in the Quran or from the Bible, but remember, keep it simple and less is more. You may know a dozen things you could say, but use the ones that are easiest for you to use and really clear. Don't argue things that don't matter. Next is recognize the impact of sects. If you're just at the mosque or the festival distributing, you may not really need to know what branch of Islam they're from. But in the long run, it really helps to know if they're Sunni or Shia. As you've heard from some former Shia, they already believe in an intercessor. So with them, what you're trying to do is get them to see that only God can pay for our sins with his blood. That's different than the Sunni. They say haram. Those Shia, they're as bad as Christians. That is shirk. They're giving Allah a partner by saying the blood of Hassan covers for them. When you get involved, you need to know what sect they're in. Expect counterattacks. Don't think you're going to be able to challenge someone and they're not going to say anything back to you. Expect it. Don't be intimidated by it. Predict in advance what they might say and have an answer to it. And admit that you might not know the answer. You can look it up later. And if they make a good point, accept it. You don't have to be down on them about everything. Remember, what we are looking for is the weight of the evidence. We're not saying you don't have a good point, because every religion has a couple of good points. Otherwise, nobody would follow it, right? Have you all thought that before? Anybody thought that before? Like Buddhism has some good points. And so does Islam. You might say the hospitality, the family, whatever. So don't be afraid to say that is a good point, even if it's something against what our faith is. But that, you don't concede that that is the overwhelming evidence. Admit that Christians have problems, that we are not perfect, that we have done unpleasant things over time. Admit it. We're not trying to hide anything. 2 Corinthians says, putting forth the truth plainly. We lay aside deception. This is the way I look at polemics when they attack me. I do like Shakespeare. Not many people do anymore, but this quote I think you will understand. This is some guys weary from battle, and King Henry V says, as we are, we would not seek a fight. But as we are, we will not shun one. So I never go looking for a fight. But if they start attacking, the Bible has been changed, blah, 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 then that opens the door for me to say, well, I'm sorry to tell you, but the Quran has been changed more than the Bible. You see, so it's how they are, again, the person that you're dealing with. I don't really challenge Islam until the time I think is appropriate, that if they really need to. So, for example, a couple of women, I think that our helper here was with me one of the times when we met with one or two of the women where I thought, I've known them for a couple of years. We've talked about similarities and differences in the gospel, but I really need to start challenging. So in my mind, I had an idea of what I would say. And one of them was, where is the blood sacrifice for sin in Islam? So if you've got an ongoing relationship, you might get to the chance where you eventually do need to give them a pebble in their shoe. But I'm not somebody who looks for a fight. Some people love to. They learned all this apologetics. They've got to use it. Here is our technique train. What I'm going to give you are some techniques from SWAP, Streetwise Apologetics and Polemics. One is sit tight, earn the right. And I say that because if you haven't been around Muslims where they are attacking Christianity, attacking the Bible, insulting you, it is not fun. In fact, one of the evangelists who works with us came over from the Middle East, and when we were in the mosque at a lecture, or several times any of these interfaith events or recruiting events to Islam, he really, literally, he couldn't sit tight. He would be jumping up in the back and pacing all around. He's like, I can't take this. It is hard. You feel like, but that's not true, or you're misquoting that scripture. It will happen all the time. So I'm telling you, you really have to be patient. Sit tight. And when I say earn the right, I mean by you listening to them, then they are going to have to listen to you sooner or later. And that's what number 2 is. Hang loose, you're the caboose. So, I will listen to someone rail on, scolding me, criticizing Christianity, Christians, shooting my apologetics. I'll listen to all that if I need to for, say, an hour, hopefully less. But if I can get 5 minutes to clearly share the gospel or some other important truth, it's worth it. So sit tight, through, like in a train, sometimes the old rails are really bumpy. It can be hard. So sit tight and hang loose, you're the caboose. We mentioned less is more. You need to keep it short, sharp, shock. If you hear somebody who gives a long rambling answer, you know that people don't always listen. If you can be concise. The next one is practical theological. And for that, I'm going to actually give an example. This is a swap for when they come after you for, you're saying God was in a woman. He was born through the birth canal. He ate. He went to the bathroom. He got dusty feet. You see, that is an attack. A swap on that that's practical and not theological and kind of leaves them like, is you say, yes, that's why Christians love him so much. We're thankful that he was willing to do that. And it kind of leaves them speechless. Now, if this gets out on the internet, they'll find a response to it. But it's a totally out of left field. It's not the kind of answer that you're hearing up there at the main stage, but it's a kind of answer that you can use that's really fast, that turns something bad into something good. And that's what our next thing is. It's turnaround. Turn around any accusation, anything that they say into something good. For example, I was at a Muslim meeting one time, and I was shocked. The woman teacher of this circle, like a Holocaust circle, women's circle, she actually said, Allah is so wonderful. He loved Muhammad so much that when Muhammad met this woman that he wanted to marry. He wasn't sure he could do it, but Allah told him, sure, have your son divorce this woman and you can have her and you can marry her. That's how wonderful Allah is. And I'm sitting there like, that's one of the worst stories in the Quran. And you think that's wonderful? So from that, I have a quintessential, a perfect example of, if they can do that with something disgusting, any attack that you get, you can turn into something good. I'll give you another one. If they say, for example, the Bible, the Injil, it's gone. The church, they didn't even have it. You know, that wasn't created for hundreds of years. Well, I could get into all this documentary information, but I tend to just say, you're right, it wasn't written by Jesus, it wasn't available then, but the church began just quoting prophecies from the Old Testament. They used the Bible of the Jews because they were so clearly about Jesus. So you see, that's not giving the answer they expect, but it's really short, and it's like, wow, that's a turnaround, is when they have an attack and you turn it into something positive. Then predict and diffuse. If you've had several discussions with Muslims, you will know what they're going to say next, most likely. So try to predict what that is and take the power out of it. So, for example, if you know they're going to say to you, the word Trinity is not in the Bible. Okay, don't let that intimidate you. Sometimes you can even say it before them. You know, the word Trinity is not actually in the Bible. It's a theological term, but it explains the way God reveals himself to us in both the Old Testament and the New Testament. You see, it's diffusing an argument, and I personally find that arguments over the Trinity are not terribly productive with Muslims. What seems to work best is to get them to understand incarnation, that God would become human flesh. And once they accept that, I've found that the Trinity is no problem at all. This is what they've told me. And the current example I love to use is an empty cup. Here's a, don't want to show a brand. Here's a cup with not much in it. And I will say, well, where is air? Where is the air? There's air around us, but there's also air in the cup. So if air can be in something and outside of something, why would you say God can't be? Are you saying air is more powerful than God? So this is a new one I haven't ever heard anyone use. Now you have it, and I think it's very disarming, which kind of takes away that attack against would God become man. You think air can do it, but God can't? Okay. Soft and sideways. That is, I don't like to come head on to some issues. I like to come a little bit more to the side and be soft. And that's why we use the Path of the Prophets method. You can down this on our website. It's www.christianfrommuslim.com. Go to resources, and we have it there in 3 languages so far, with more coming. But this goes to the side. It doesn't come directly on for their arguments against salvation. It uses what they know is true, and from there it adds to it, so that, as one PhD I shared it with on a campus said, he was an Iranian guy, and when I got near where Jesus comes on the picture, he said, so Jesus is the Lamb of God. So that's coming at it sideways. I used to, like most other Christians, explain the gospel like you'd explain it to your neighbor. But I learned from intensive training with a Palestinian evangelist. We worked together for several years, and he said, no, sister, you don't say that. You have to explain it this way. And some of you know him, I think. And so, yeah, it really started to make sense to me. So that's coming soft and sideways. It's not arguing. It's just, well, let us explain it to you through what you know. And finally, illustrations and stories. Those are a very good thing to use. You remember yesterday in our seminar on reaching Muslim women, we said try to find out if she's more educated and intellectual or has more heart needs. So I said that you want to use illustrations, analogies, and stories, especially if she is not educated, can't read, and has a lot of heart needs from abuse or something. But if she is very educated, you can use your more intellectual arguments. But even if she is, there are some stories, and this is for men too. Certain parables really resonate because they come out of a culture that is story-based, and the Bedouins sitting around the fire. So even the city people and even Americans like a story or an illustration. So consider using those. Find the ones that you're comfortable with, the analogies you like. We do have a few in this. And one that I say is very good, for example, with women, is the lost jewel, the lost coin. Because Muslim women tend to value their jewelry, probably similar to what happened in the Middle East when Jesus was alive. So I've talked to women who have lost jewelry. And I explain Jesus' story that shows how valuable they are. And it really strikes home. One of them lost a diamond ring, and it was valuable. So that's something you can use. The pearl of great price is another one that's really good. And many different ones of Jesus' parables. So be current with the parables, know them. And also what we teach in another seminar is called Out of the Salt Shaker. And that is a way that you just share little bits of truth every time you come together as they naturally come up. A friend of mine said, she was actually a missionary, she said, before I talked to you, I really didn't know how to get the gospel to them or these messages of truth. But when I talked about using everyday occurrences and saying, oh yeah, that reminds me of this parable in the Bible, you want to keep it short. Just like if you're teaching a toddler, you don't want to overwhelm them. So if you can come up with short things like that you can say when you're doing something together, like maybe you're cooking and you say, oh yeah, that reminds me of the story of the oil lamp. Or it's dark and you can say, oh yeah, that light we needed, Jesus is the light of the world. Something short. Remember, we're doing short and sweet. Now this is the big four. Those are the big four things that you need to learn how to defend, that you will be attacked on most of the time. And those are the Trinity, the incarnation, which means Jesus becoming man, Jesus' death on the cross, and the integrity of the Bible. I'm not going to take time to go through them because you've heard a lot of that already on the main stage, and we do deal with these individually in our lesson series online. So again, if you go to our website, www.christianfrommuslim.com, go to lessons. We have basically a year's worth of lessons. They're half-hour lesson with a study guide that goes with it. And it will deal with these there. Now for polemics, the idea is to open unbelievers' eyes to the fallacies and the darkness of their faith. And in Acts 26, Paul is testifying that the Lord told him to bring people out of darkness into light. So that's what we are doing with Islam. If you're doing polemics, remember, you're not trying to, got you, I'm smarter, I'm better. I know a lot of people see it that way. No. Try to keep the main thing to remove the stumbling blocks, to help them see the errors in their own faith. I just briefly want to mention a few tactics that you will hear while you are sitting tight and earning the right to speak. And if you know what they are, you will be better able to address them. We say to foreknow is to be forearmed. So the first one is generalization. Watch out for this because they will find a rare example that favors their case. For example, it might be a lenient Muslim ruler, and then they generalize that to everything. And they take a bad thing in Christianity and generalize that. They'll say, look, Islam was more lenient than Christianity. And they act as if that is always the case. But you need to know that they're probably taking a specific example and generalizing it as an attack against you. Then there's the cultural excuse. We see this a lot on campuses or when Muslims are making a statement to the West. Anything that we don't like, they will say, that's just culture, has nothing to do with Islam. I think one of our sisters here spoke to me about that yesterday, and that's true. It is based on Islam. That's another talk we don't have time for today, but yes, the practices of Islam that are considered abusive are based on the principles of Islam. Very little is from pre-Islamic. And then overwhelming. That goes along with sit tight, earn the right, and hang loose through the caboose. They will try to overwhelm you. And I've seen this a lot in debates where rather than address the complaints, the Muslim debater will just say a bunch of stuff really fast and act like, haha, I got you. And all the Muslims are applauding. And it's like, no, you didn't address any of the issues. You just said a lot fast. So it can be overwhelming. If you are in a discussion, you can say, and even the experts will say this, if any of you watch, for example, Hatun Tash online, she will say, give me one thing, or let me answer that before you go on. And so that's what we can do. So watch that a tactic of they're trying to overwhelm us. And I'm telling you, please don't use these tactics yourselves. These are unfair. Try to, again, set forth the truth plainly. We have nothing to be ashamed of. It's good. So remember to look confident. That's what Paul tells us in Philippians 1:28. We have nothing to fear. Know the weak spots in your argument, what they might attack. We talked about predicting it. Know what those weak spots are and either don't use those weak arguments or think of something you can respond to their accusation. Don't let them win. And remember, if you don't know, you can always check another source and get back to them. Knowing what to expect is a big help. Congratulations for coming here, because I believe those of you in this lecture are going to be more prepared to use what you've learned than those who are elsewhere. So as far as challenging, we're not going into a lot of it, but remember, you do need to say things in love. Select the setting that you are in. Use your best challenges. What you say to men and women is different. You sometimes can use women's rights as both a connection and an exposure and a challenge. When you tell them, well, I try to know everything I can about women's rights in the Bible. And I suggest that you do that with the Quran and the Hadith. What I find is most women don't know what Islam says about women. They're shocked when they find out. So I like to encourage them to look into it themselves. Then I'm not the bearer of bad news. It's not the evil Christian saying it. No, they're looking it up and they'll have to go on their own when they read what is said in Sahih al-Bukhari or Ali's Nahj al-Balagha. Those kind of things will make a difference. I've seen it happen. We talked about the different sects and expect counterattacks. We talked about that and to admit our problems. So this is just to summarize how you present, whether it's SWAP or your PAT. You can have theological reasons that you believe Christianity over Islam, practical reasons like the way societies work, and personal preferences. with all of those, you will say, I think the weight of the evidence, for me, it favors whatever. And I'm assuming that all of you here are here because you are believers and you have reasons. So just to leave you with one challenge, I think personally the best challenge that is a challenge, so it's polemics, but it's also gospel related. It's, would Allah's character change? Does his character change? They'll usually say no. And I point out, well, all of the prophets between Adam and Jesus, they all had blood sacrifice for sin. That was required to satisfy Allah's justice. So what happened to the blood sacrifice for sin in Islam? Is God's character changing? Is it the same God? Isn't he just anymore? Remember with the son of Abraham, how he was saved by the lamb as a substitute. And depending on how much time you have, you can go into detail on this. You can do the path of the prophets, which uses the substitution of the son of Abraham as an analogy for accepting God's sacrifice of the Lamb of God, of Jesus. If you don't have much time and they're leaving, you'll say, quickly, you can say, well, just one thought. Where is the blood sacrifice for sin in Islam? Christianity and Judaism have it. Islam is supposedly related, but it doesn't have it. You can do it that quickly. And also, I especially like to use that with Christians that convert to Islam. You say, do you remember hearing anything about Jesus on the cross? Did you ever see a cross? And did you ever hear about the 10 Commandments and the sacrifices of the Old Testament? What did you do with that when you became a Muslim? How did you put that into it? And literally, like I have a middle-aged convert to Islam who told me, I never thought about that. And so that makes them think.